In this lesson, we're going to be talking about other types of NMAP scans other than the basic SYN scan, the Connect scan, and the UDP scan that we've talked about a little bit previously. These are some different types of scans that you want to have in your back pocket in order to do some double checking in the case where you run across firewalls that may be giving you trouble in determining whether ports are actually open on your target systems or not. So the first scan we're going to talk about is an idle scan. It's called an idle scan because we use a system that's not actually doing anything in the way of network activity, and we appear to bounce messages off that idle system. What's really going on is we're checking the IP identification header of this zombie system or idle system in order to determine whether ports on a target system are open. So we send messages that appear to be from this idle system to the target system, meaning the target system is going to reply to the idle system, and then we can check the IP ID header to see whether it is incremented or whether it is not incremented. And based on that response or lack of response, we can determine whether ports are open. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a Wireshark capture. That way we can see what's actually going on here. You can see we're doing an idle scan using Zombie 192.168.1.1. Not all systems can be used as zombie systems, so it may take a little bit of playing to find one that can actually be used here. So what we're doing is we're sending messages to my target, which is 192.168.1.22, and I'm spoofing my source address to be 192.168.1.1. So the 1.22 target host is going to be replying to the 1.1 zombie host, and then we're sending messages to the zombie host. That means we can't be tracked at the target. In order to be tracked, you would have to have somebody at the target get in touch with somebody at the zombie and do some sort of comparison in order to figure out that you were the one that was actually launching the scans. But the target can't actually see your IP address if you don't do any other sort of communication with them. All they're going to see is communications from the zombie host. So we've got our port scan back, and it looks like it's been pretty accurate. So I'm going to go back to Wireshark now. I'm going to stop the capture, do a filter here, so I can only see communications between my zombie and my target. So you can see I send a message to the zombie, trying to figure out what the IP ID is. And then I'm sending messages to the target here with a source IP of this spoofed IP. And you can see that Wireshark doesn't quite like this because it's flagged it as black, suggesting that that's not quite right. So we're sending a bunch of messages out, and then we check the IP ID here by going to the zombie host, and we check the reply over here. In this case, I see that my IP ID is 938. And again, it should have either incremented or not incremented based on whether the target system has sent resets back or not sent resets back or sent syntax back, depending on the message that we're sending. You can see we're sending a lot of SYN messages to the target, in which case for an open port, we should get a SYNAC back, and for a closed port, we should get a reset, and if it's filtered, we should get nothing at all. So what NMAP is doing is it's doing all of this calculation of what the IP ID should be based on whether it's going to get a packet back at the zombie host or not. So it's doing all of these calculations on the IP identification header and trying to figure out whether ports are open. That's an idle scan. Let's take a look at an Xmas scan. Before I do that, I'm going to close this. I'm going to clear my filter there, and let's start up a new capture. Again, I need administrative privileges here. I'm going to do an Xmas scan. And an Xmas scan just lights up a number of the header fields in the TCP header. So a bunch of flags are going to be lit up. I'm going to do 192.168.1.22 again. And I'm going to send a bunch of messages to this target with a bunch of TCP flags that have been turned on that wouldn't normally be turned on in order to figure out what's actually going on at the target system and whether the port is open, whether it's filtered or not. So here's the messages that I'm sending. You can see I've got urge, push, and fin all turned on, and that would be an unusual packet to send. So I'm sending those out to see what response I get. And you can see some of the responses here. I'm getting a reset and an ACK back. And the reset would suggest that those ports are closed. So that's another type of scan that you can run. I'm going to close this one down. We're going to start another capture up. What I'm going to run here is a fin scan. And what a fin scan does is it sends a fin packet to my target, and again, makes determinations as to whether the port is open based on the response that we get. So I've done a fin scan on my target host. I've got a capture here. I'm going to filter out all of the other stuff. And I'm going to check my TCP headers, and you can see out of my TCP headers, just the fin flag is set. So that's a fin scan. I'm just sending the fin message. Again, you would use this type of scan if you want to check targets that may be behind firewalls or may have something else strange going on, and you want to just double check your SYN scan or your TCP open scan. You could run one of these other types of scans and see whether you get different results and maybe get some different ports that are open. So that's some other types of NMAP scans that you can run.